Hey, good day, all you Bible readers. Today is March the 31st, the last day in March, and we're looking at Judges 3 through 5 today. Now, yesterday we learned that there is a repeating cycle in this book. The people sin, they suffer, they repent, they're restored, and then they have rest. Well, today we're going to see that cycle repeated 4 times with 4 separate judges that God raises up for Israel. Now, right at the beginning of chapter 3, we're given the reason that God didn't drive out all the rest of the people that were in the land. This new generation didn't know God, nor had they known what he had done for them, and they did evil by going after other gods and intermarrying with all these people groups that were left behind. God chose to test them to see if they would follow him or not. Also, God knew that this new generation of Israel did not know a thing about war. He would use these enemies to teach them war. Israel had been under the control of the king of Mesopotamia for 8 years, and Israel cried out to God, and he raised up Othniel to be the first judge of Israel. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should. This is the same Othniel we saw back in Joshua, the younger brother of Caleb. He captured the city, he won a wife, Caleb's daughter, and God appointed Othniel to be the first judge, and that was a very strategic move on God's part to provide a commander skilled in war to lead them. And after the defeat of the king of Mesopotamia, Israel had rest for 40 years until Othniel died. Israel does evil again and falls under the rule of King Eglon of Moab for 18 years. Israel cries out again. God raises up Ehud as their judge, a left-handed man. Now, in those days, the majority of men carried their swords on their left side so that they could draw it with their right hand. Ehud made a dagger about 18 inches long, and he hid it under his clothes on his right side where it would go undetected. And on the day when Israel went to pay tribute to the king, Ehud informed Eglon that he had a secret message from the Lord. Well, now, most men of power, they have big egos, and Eglon's no exception. The king sent everyone out of the room so he could hear privately from Ehud. And then Ehud drew his dagger and thrust it into the big belly of Eglon so much that it wouldn't come out. So Eglon was sort of the Moabite version of Jabba the Hutt from Star Wars. Ehud then locks the doors of the king's chambers so that nobody could enter and makes his escape undetected. No one was alarmed for some time, and they thought he just must be relieving himself. But eventually, they discovered that Eglon was dead. But by the time the Moabites had caught up with Ehud, he had mustered the men of Israel, and he slaughtered 10,000 Moabites that day. With Ehud as their judge, Israel had rest for 80 years. Now, it's not a big stretch to say that Israel probably went right back to doing evil and had cried out to God again. While under the oppression from the Philistines, we learn of Israel's third judge, Shamgar, who killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad. An ox goad. Well, that's a strong, heavy stick, about 4, 5, 6 feet long, with a right-angle spike at the end. A cattle prod. Now, chapter 4 and 5 brings us to Deborah and Barak. Now, Deborah was a prophetess that was the judge over Israel, and Barak was the commander of Israel's army. Now, the people had done evil in the sight of the Lord, and they were under the cruel rule of Jabin, king of the Canaanites. He had 900 iron chariots, which is quite a formidable armored division for those days. Sisera was the commander of Jabin's army. Well, Deborah told Barak that the Lord had given Jabin's army into his hands to go muster 10,000 men for war. But Barak said he wouldn't go up to fight unless Deborah came with him. Okay, there's obviously a little something going on here with Barak. He didn't accept the Lord's words spoken through Deborah. It almost sounds like when your kids are afraid of the dark and they want you to hold their hand while you escort them. Well, Deborah agrees to go, but she warns Barak, you'll still get the victory over the Canaanites, but you won't get the glory. That's going to go to a woman. To me, this seems like, okay, tough guy, God offered it to you first, but since you showed weakness in your faith and you needed some assistance from a woman to bolster your resolve, well, I'm going to let the woman finish your work and take the glory from you. Well, Israel does defeat the Canaanites. However, Barak was not successful at containing Sisera within the battlefield, and he escaped. Now, while Sisera was fleeing from the battle, he was nearly exhausted, and he runs into Jael, a woman, and she invited him to seek refuge in her tent. Now, she was a married woman, and no man had any business being in her tent but her husband, but he entered it anyway. She covered him up with a rug to hide him, so if anyone would come by looking for him, she would say, "No, he's not here," and they couldn't see him. Sisera was tired, and he asked for a drink, and Jael provided it. However, instead of water, she gave him milk to drink. Well, everybody knows what happens when you get your fill of milk. You pass into a milk coma. Well, after Sisera falls asleep, Jael takes a tent peg and a mallet, and she drives it right through his temple and kills him. Well, thus the word spoken through Deborah came to pass, that a woman would get the glory, and it wouldn't go to Barak. So we close today with the song of Deborah and Barak. This is the third song that we've seen since the Exodus from Egypt. We had the song of Miriam, we had the song of Moses, and now, today, we have the song of Deborah and Barak. For the most part, it's a poetic account of how God delivered them from the Canaanites and pays homage to the woman who actually sealed the victory, being Jael. However, there were two places where popular phrases stood out in this song. The first was in 5:2, that the leaders took the lead in Israel, that the people offered themselves willingly, bless the Lord. And in verse 9, my heart goes out to the commanders of Israel, who offered themselves willingly among all the people, bless the Lord. And after all this happened, the Lord gave them rest for 40 years. How about you? Are you offering yourself willingly to the Lord's service? It seems to be a pretty key phrase in this song, recorded for all time just so that we would know about it. I'd say willful service is a key component to finding rest in the Lord, even in our time today. Well, thanks for watching today. It sure is good to visit with you guys every day on these videos, and I hope you'll come back tomorrow for more on Set Sail with Grace Harbor.